Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on clinical SAS programming. In a previous video, we have seen how to transpose data from wide to long format using data step arrays and do loops. So in this video, we will see how to transpose long data to wide data using again data step arrays and do loop. Along with that, we also need a retain concept for this type of transpose. So here on the top right we have our top left we have our input data. So wherein we have one record per visit, per vital sign, per subject uh, reported, which is like for say for example for subject 1001 at visit number 1, two vital signs are collected, diastolic blood pressure and systolic blood pressure, and the result of that vital sign is presented in a variable called VSORRES and the associated unit is presented in VSORRESU. So, but the requirement is to have one record per subject per visit with both vital signs, which is systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, present side by side. So here we have the results available on two different records, but we want them to be present on the same record for each subject and visit number. So here I'll try to explain how the PDV behaves with this kind of transpose. So the in actual real time what happens is like in PDV we'll only have one observation at a time. So here I have just elaborated it a bit little more just to see and understand the retain concept a little more. So I'll try to show you the PDV concept for all observations in this. So now let's take a look at the code. So we have an input data set named VS and we have a by statement. So previously the data is sorted based on subject, visit number and test CD. And then we are creating two new variables, systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, and we have specified them on the retain statement. So whenever we specify a variable on the retain statement, so it marks in the PDV that the values have to be retained from one observation to other observation. So when processing, so by default, if you do not specify a variable on the retain statement, so the newly created variables get set to null between one observation to another observation. So we know that SAS processes one observation at a time, and then in between observations all the newly created variables would be set to null when we are reading data from an existing data set. And then on the next two lines we have two array statements. So on the first array statement we are creating an array named testcd with a dimension of 2, and then we have assigned temporary values of sysbp and diabp to that array. So this means so we can refer the value of sysbp based on this logic. Test CD of 1 refers to SysBP and test CD of 2 refers diabp. And then similarly we have created a array to temporarily group the variables sysbp and diabp, so with the name of new var. So sysbp can be referred with the name of array with new vars 1, and similarly diabp can be referred with new vars 2. So this number here in the square brackets represent the total number of values which we are passing on to that or array. So new vars of 2 refers diabp and new vars of 1 refers sysbp. And then we have an if statement, if first dot visit num, then call missing of new vars of all. So here we are setting all the variables which are associated with the new vars array to null on the first record of each subject and visit. And then we have a do loop which is being iterated. Uh, so here test CD array is being defined with two values. So the dim would return a value of 2. So dim function on test CD would return a value of 2. So this means that this loop gets iterated two times, once with a value of 1 and the second time with a value of 2 in I variable. And within that variable, we are checking if the VS test CD value present on a particular row is equal to the test CD value which is being defined in the test CD array. And on that record, if VS OR ES not is equal to missing, we are assigning or converting the VS or RES value to numeric and assigning it to the variable referred in new vars array. So here for the if it is 1, so it refers to sys BP. When it is iterating for the second time with I is equal to 2, it refers dia BP. So we are checking whether the test CD value on a particular row is either sys BP or dia BP and assigning the value to the variables referred in this new vars array sys BP and dia BP. And then we are creating one more flag called a variable called flag and assigning it a value of 1 based on if it is the last record within the visit per subject. So we'll have a value of 1 or 0. So let's try to create that variable here. So flag variable is also being created. So this is the overall view of the code. So now let's see the execution, how it actually works. So now let's say SAS is processing this first observation. So it reads the value of 1001 visit num1 vs test cd is equal to dia bp and vs orres is equal to 80 vs orresu is equal to mmHg. So for all the newly created variables, SAS would initialize it with missing value. So we represent the numeric missing value with a period or dot in the PDV. So it has been initialized with missing values when the first observation is being processed. Even before the first observation is being processed, these would be set to null, and for the first observation for the existing variables, the values are being pulled into the PDV. And now let us come to this execution of this particular line of code. So what happens if first dot visit num, then call missing of all variables set in new vars array. So for new vars array, we have sysbp and diabp. So we are explicitly forcing the variable sysbp and diabp values to null if it is the first record within the visit of a subject. So if when we say first dot visit num, so we need to take a look at the bivariable order as well. So it says when we say first dot visit num, so it says is this the first record with this value in visit num variable in this subject ID variable. So when this first observation is being processed, the question that would be asked for this first dot visit num is this the first record with a value of 1 in visit num variable for subject 1001? Yes. So on that case, what we are doing? So we are setting the values to null. So again, there was that initial null, but we are explicitly forcing it to a missing value now. So that this line would do that missing value assignment for these two variables because we have specified that all the variables specified in new vars array has to have missing value. And then the processing of this do loop begins. So for the first time when I is equal to 1, so what will happen? So it checks whether the VS test CD, which is dia BP, so is equal to the test CD1. So test CD1 is test CD of I when I is being equal to 1. So if VS test CD is equal to, which is dia BP is equal to sys BP. So this becomes false for the first iteration because on the first record the test CD value is dia BP, but test CD1 is sys BP. So nothing happens here. So and then now let's say we are iterating it for I is equal to 2. So again dia BP is there and test CD of 2, which is nothing but dia BP. So this condition becomes true. So this conversion of VS over RES becomes it converts the VS over RES to numeric value and assigns it to new vars 2. New vars 2 is nothing but our dia BP variable. So this missing value would be overwritten with the value of 80 in dia BP variable. So dia BP variable. So when the first observation processing is completed for all these lines of code, and we have one more line of code which says if last dot visit num then flag is equal to 1. So when we say this last dot visit num, so SAS asks this question, is this the last record with a value of 1 in visit num variable for subject 1001? So we have two records. So this is not the first record. So in this case, so it will have a missing value. And now all the statements are executed on first observation. Now the processing begins for second observation. So now before we read all the values from first observation, second observation into PDB, what happens is for all the newly created variables, which means here whatever variables which are not present in the input data set, which are being created in this data step would be set to null by default if they were not specified to on the retain statement. So but here as we have specified sysbp and diabp on the retain statement, what would happen is the values would be retained from the in the pdb before the second observation is being processed. Now the values from second observation would be fetched into pdb. So MMHG. So even before any of the statements executed, the PDV looks like this immediately after the values from second observation are fetched into PDV. And then this code gets executed. So if first dot visit num, so let me clean these things up again. So if first dot visit num, then call missing of new vars all. So is this the first record with a value of 1 in visit num variable for 1001? So this is not true because this is the second record or the last record. So nothing happens. So when the second observation is being executed with this line of code. So and then the do loop begins. So it gets iterated twice, once with the value of 1. So let's say now I is equal to 1 is being iterated. So if vs test cd is equal to test cd of I, test cd of 1, so test CD of 1 is sysbp. So on this record, so sysbp when I is equal to 1, this becomes true. So what happens? The VSORRES value, which is 120, gets converted to numeric and gets assigned to new vars of 1. What is new vars of 1? This is sysbp. So the existing missing value would be overwritten with 120. So and then it gets iterated for second time. So on this second record, when in the second iteration when I is equal to 2, the test CD value is sysbp and test CD of 2 is diabp. So this condition fails, so nothing happens here. So and then the code comes to the execution if last dot visit num, then flag is equal to 1. So now SAS asks this question, is this the last record with a value of 1 in visit num for subject 1001? So this is true because we only have two records. So the second record will become the last record. So this flag would be set to 1. Now let us see the processing for second, third and other observations. So or else we'll do one thing. We'll just try to process the observation for visit num 2 for subject 1002. Or let's better do it for all the records so that we'll have that complete clarity. So now what happens is like as we have specified sysbp and diabp on the retain statement, the values present in the like before the current observation is being read will be carried forward into the next observation. So now the third observation gets read into pdb. So 1001 visit number 2 diabp, so 85 and mmHg. So if you now take a look at like immediately after it read into this thing and even before any of these things are processed, so the values from a previous visit are carried forward into current visit. So which is visit num 1 values are carried forward into visit num 2 as we have specified on the these two variables on the retain statement. So this is the exact reason why we use if first dot visit num then call missing of all the newly created variables. So if when this line of code is being executed on the third observation, so if first dot visit num, the question is this the first record with a value of 2 for subject 1001? So the question is true, the answer is true. So what would happen? The values would be set to null. So we are making sure that the values from a previous visit are not being carried forward onto the current visit by making use of this if statement. So this will become a key thing. So in if otherwise you will get some values being carried forward from previous visit or previous objects onto the current visit or of current subject. So and then the loop gets iterated for I is equal to 1 comma 2. When 1 is equal to the condition becomes false when because for first we are checking for sysbp for iteration 1. On iteration 2 we are checking for diabp. So on iteration 2 when I is equal to 2, so the diabp this condition becomes true. So the value present in VSOR or ES gets assigned to diabp. So this will become 85. And now let's continue and speed up things a little bit. So sysbp, so we have 125 and then mmHg. So here the value 125 would be there and then 85 because we have specified this on the return statement. And next is 1002 1. So here again this would be missing, flag would be 1 because this is the last record within visit 2 for subject 1001. So sysbp, so even before the third observation is being processed, the values 125 and 85 would be retained from previous thing. So next diabp of 90 mmHg. So the observations values from the next observations are loaded and now this becomes true. If first dot visit num then call missing of new was. Is this the first record with a value of 1 in visit num variable for subject 1002? So this is true. So these will be set to null. So within this iteration, so what would happen? This becomes true for diabp during the second iteration and the value of 90 would be assigned to the diabp variable and for sysbp it would have been null. And then on for subject 1002 on the next record, so sysbp, so the value is 140, so mmHg and then so this becomes true on the first iteration in the do loop, so this would become 140 and the value of 90 of diabp would be retained. So now we have completed and again as this as the second record of 1002 for visit num 1 is the last record for visit num 1, so the flag would be set to 1. And now let's come to the last observation, last visit of second subject. So 1002 visit to diabp, the value of 85 mmHg. So even before the code, any of these lines of code is executed, the values of 140 and 90 are carried forward. So, and when this line of code is being executed, as this is the first record with the value of 2 in visit num for subject 1002, so these would be set to null or missing. So, and then the loop carries forward, continues. So, let me clean these things up. So what happens here again? So when I is equal to 1, so what will be the condition? So if diabp is equal to sysbp, so this fails. So nothing happens. So this would still remain missing. So now what happens when I is equal to 2? So vs testcd is equal to diabp and then testcd of 2 is diabp. So this condition becomes true. So new vars of 2 is diabp. So diabp will get a value of VSORRES converted to numeric, which is 85. So we'll have a value of 85 here. And then when this last record gets processed, so before the last record gets processed, the values will be retained for these two newly created variables. So 1002, 2, sysbp, missing. So here if you see, this is missing numeric value and mmHg. So now this line of when this line of code is being executed, so what happens? So as this is not the first record, what would happen? So these would remain the same, and then when the loop gets iterated for the first time, I is equal to 1, what would happen? So sysbp, the value in this record in VS testcd variable is sysbp, so testcd1 is sysbp. So though this condition becomes true, the value in VSORRES is null. So as this condition becomes false, so this would remain missing. And when I is equal to 2, the value in VS testcd variable is sysbp and testcd of 2 is diabp. So this condition becomes false. So and again, as this becomes false, as we have used and, so there is no impact on the subsequent condition. So when the if last dot visit num is being executed, so the question that would be asked is this the last record with a value of 2 in visit num for subject 1002? So this is true, so the value of 1 would be assigned. So now we have seen how the data step processes all these things. So if we now see on all the last records of each visit of a subject, so we have the required result. So if you see diabp 80 120, 85 125, 90 140 and 85 and missing. So on all the last records of each visit, we have the required results. So if we just subset in a next step for the records where flag is equal to 1 and keep only the required variables, we get the required end result. So this is how we can make use of arrays along with and do loops and retain statement to transpose data using data step. So again, the advantage of using this step is like to have uh, if you can specify a number of variables and you can like it's not only we are creating only two sets of variables SBP and IRBP. So we can in fact create additional sets of variables using new array and just specifying the required condition once in the do loop. Thank you for watching and keep learning.